What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Aapl, Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down some very important factors to consider when it comes to the market's price action for tomorrow, what's going on with Apple's earnings once again, and what's happening with all this data affecting the markets. But before I break anything down, all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. This offer ends in just 2 weeks, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market. So when it comes to the market right now, Apple's currently down 2.8%, trying to show a little bit of life, but it's still quite down. And if Apple maintains these lower levels and starts sinking going into tomorrow, this is going to cause the market to slow down. Why is Apple dropping this significantly? That's because earnings just came out and things were not the strongest for the company. So what happened? Apple reported the fiscal fourth quarter earnings on Thursday that beat analyst expectations for sales, but they revealed that overall sales fell for the fourth quarter in a row. And when it comes to their outlook for December, things are not necessarily the strongest for revenue. But it wasn't that horrible overall. You have to look at Apple's overall data right here. Their EPS ended up beating, which was not bad. Revenue was not bad. iPhone revenue was meeting expectations just barely. Mac revenue was a little bit down, and everything else was close to expectations. But like we said before, their outlook is not that strong for the December quarter. And their revenue right now is still projected to not be the strongest. So with these sales not meeting a lot of investors' expectations and the overall macroeconomic effects getting the best of this quarter, this is not the best of news for Apple. Because of this, this is leading to a sell-off, and because Apple is so big, it makes up a big chunk of the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, and etc. This is going to have a negative effect on these stocks. So now it's trying to rebound a little bit. It's still down 2.7%. It was down like 3.3% earlier. We'll see if this thing could try to hold up. If it continues to sink even lower, this will likely lead to more selling. And I still think the odds favor the downside, though, looking at what they reported. So we want to be very careful going into tomorrow. Now, when it comes to other things coming out for earnings, we have just a couple of others, but nothing too significant for Friday. And I think earnings are pretty much done for the week. Nothing too big is coming out. But going into Friday, which is going to be tomorrow, we have some more data coming out. So an hour before the market opens, we have the unemployment data is coming out. We have the non-farm payrolls report, the unemployment rate coming out. We're projecting around 3.8%. Let's hope it's very close to that. If it's a little bit too low, this could be a little negative for the market, so be very careful there. The labor force participation rates coming out and all these like labor pieces of data an hour before the market opens. This unemployment rate is going to be the most important piece of data, so watch that very carefully. And also the non-farm payrolls, that's going to be important too. Then after that, we have some PMI data coming out 15 minutes and 30 minutes after the market opens. This is going to be very important for services and the other sectors for the economy. And besides that, it's just one Fed speaker, and that's pretty much it for tomorrow. So most of the data is going to be out by 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 30 minutes after the market opens. And that's pretty much it. As of right now, the biggest catalyst, though, is going to be Apple's earnings. And I would say that the unemployment numbers are somewhat significant. So we're going to be watching all of this very carefully. Right, October, we're going to find out a lot of information about the jobs report and such. So now moving forward, when it comes to the overall market, I want to break this down. Apple is still trending down. We'll see if this continues to sell off. It likely will, however. So with this potentially happening, I just wanted to call out that Apple had a bearish divergence on its 30 minutes time frame. Right, SPY had the same thing that developed near close, a bearish divergence. Tesla had the same thing, slight bearish divergence when we continue to pump. The QQQ has the same thing right here. So we're seeing these throughout the entire market, and it looks like this time they're going to play out. These divergences don't always play out. I know that for a fact, but typically they do play out. And this time around, it looks like they're going to play out. So that tells us another signal of downside potentially coming and the market beginning to cool off a bit. Don't forget the RSIs were very, very overbought for the markets. If you look at SPY, for example, on the daily time frame, this thing pumped from 409 to 430 in just 4 days. That's insane. That's absolutely insane how much it pumped in such a short period of time. Even just pumping like 1% in a day is quite significant. So that's really crazy. And because it pumps so hard, it is due for a very, very healthy sell off, in my opinion. I think the odds favor a slight sell off going into tomorrow. I don't think this is going to be a crash. I'm not saying the market's going to tank insanely hard. We're just due for a very healthy pullback. And I think the time has finally come. So let's talk about SPY first and foremost. SPY right now, at the time I'm recording this, it's at 430. We're going to be watching 430 as support. If we lose it, watch 429.5. If that fails us, there's some support at 429, but it's not that significant. The next support to be watching for is going to be around 428.25. If that fails us, we have more significant support at 427.5 and 426.5. And below that, we have 425. 425 is going to be crucial. It's going to be pivotal for this cycle because if we lose 425, we have a big gap to fill all the way back down to the 422s. So 425 is going to be a very key support for the next few days if it continues to decline, and also 427.5. For resistance, you're going to be watching 431. And if we get above this 431 area, because we ended up rejecting off this green trend line, which was the historical support since the October low. So this was acting as resistance. I called this out earlier, and this is where we rejected. This is going to act as resistance if we try to break again. It's a 431 plus. If we break it, there is potential for 432.5. Now, what do I think is going to happen? Honestly, guys, like I showed you guys intraday, we have these bearish divergences. We're very overbought. And because Aapl is continuing to sink, it's currently down 2.7%. If it keeps dropping, which is very probable for tomorrow, as we may see more investors sell once the market opens, we could see more selling on SPY, and the odds do favor it retracing a bit. The 0.618 retracement, depending on how you draw a Fibonacci retracement, could be at 422. So there is a risk of us coming all the way down there if we lose 425. But at the very least, I see at least 427.5 being tested. And I think the odds favor some very healthy downside, right? And even if we do pull back all the way back down to like 422 or 425, we could still be in a much larger uptrend. The market could still be uptrending even if we kind of like pull back a little bit. So it's going to be healthy, nothing too scary as of right now. All right, I want to be as clear as possible. For Aapl is continuing to sink. I think it's currently around 172.75-ish. So that's this resistance right here. If Aapl continues to sell off, you're going to be watching key support. We have some support at 171.5. If we lose this, watch 170.25 and then 169.25-ish around there. If we lose this low right here at 169, I expect it to come all the way down to 168 or so. If we're bullish, you want to see Aapl try to get above 175 all over again. We're pretty far from there. But if we could get above that, there's going to be a life for it. As of right now, it's looking more bearish. It looks like the odds favor this thing selling off towards 170 and more downside, which is going to drag down SPY and the QQQ. Now, on the QQQ, we had a bearish divergence. I was talking about that. And don't forget that the QQQ also has it made a very, very big move, basically pumping almost or like more than 21 points in just a matter of like, what was this, like 4 or 5 days, which is pretty crazy. Despite this bullish cross on the PPO, intraday we have a bearish divergence. And that is, in my opinion, still just, suggesting it's due for downside and Apple's going to contribute to that. So if we want to be bullish, you want to see this thing get above 262.5. If it breaks that, there's some resistance right here at, did I say 2, guys? I'm sorry, 362.5. If we break that, watch 363.25 and then 364. If we're bearish, you want to see this thing break below this low right here at 361.5. If we lose this, there could be a head and shoulders like pattern developing like right here, where we have like a left shoulder and a head possibly. If we lose, support at 361.5, I anticipate it's going to come all the way down to 360 pretty quickly. And 360 is going to be key. We want to hold above 360. If we lose 360, I think it's going to fill this gap all the way back down to the 358s. And that's going to turn even more bearish. All right, so that's going to be a key support for tomorrow. I'm just going to maybe change this color so you guys can remember this, 360 being a key level to watch for. I think the odds do favor the downside though, and then 360 being tested, and it could break below that, so just be very careful. Going forward, looking at Tesla, I know a lot of people are looking at Tesla. We were talking about Tesla potentially pumping. It looked very bullish yesterday from a technical standpoint. And if anything, on the daily charts, we had a very, very nice trend. But the issue I see with Tesla would be the fact that on the 30 minutes time frame, we had a nice bearish divergence right here. This is very clean. And we've flipped on the PPO for the 30 minutes time frame. So it's starting to look a little weak in the after hours, thanks to Aapl. And on the 4 hour time frame, we're seeing some signals suggesting that this thing was like topping very close to this 220 area, and it could start reversing. Because when you look back at Tesla, let me show you this on TradingView. When you look back at Tesla, basically, we have some tight resistance between 219 and about 220, this 220 area. We tend to see Tesla get these rejections. We have some tough, blocks right here that lead to selling. So with that being said, okay, Tesla came very close to that area and it ended up rejecting. We were talking about 220 being a tough area for Tesla, and we came to 219 very close. So I anticipate some downside for Tesla. I think that Tesla might pull back a little bit. It's not going to be that bad, just a very slight, healthy pullback. And I think that this will just create another dip buying opportunity, because for the medium term, I'm still very bullish going into December. But for the short term, I'm leaning more bearish. I think it's going to cool off a little bit. So we're currently at about 216. If we break this, you're going to be watching this 217 resistance. If we break this, there's some resistance at 218, 219.25, and then 220. We have some very tight resistance up here. We need to get above 221. If we achieve that, that's going to be bullish. But as of right now, it's not looking like Tesla's going to achieve that. Now, if we start selling off, watch some support at 214. If we lose 214, watch 212 to 212.5. If we lose that, watch 210, 208 as some support. And then we have this 205 area coming next. That is going to be key for Tesla. Now, Tesla also gapped up really big during the pre-market session. Let me just show you how big this gap is on Tesla. We have a huge gap that formed. So I want to be very careful when it comes to days like this, because we have a potential reversal signal. And we have this huge gap all the way down to about this 205 area. So if Tesla ends up breaking below, I would say this 212 area, if we lose that, I could see it filling the gap and coming down to 205. Completely healthy, not the end of the world. Could come down to fill the gap and then bounce. As long as it manages to hold above its previous resistance and support levels, I mean, it still has potential to uptrend. This could just be a very healthy pullback nonetheless. So watch those levels. On Nvidia, it's looking a bit more bearish because 438s to 440 were two important levels I called out. So right here, if you go back on the chart, you will notice that 438 is where we got rejected from in the past, and also 440. This is where we start to see liquidity being grabbed before shorts start to pile in and before the selling pressure emerges. That's when algos start to trigger a big change in their flow. So with that happening on Nvidia, when we pumped, we happened to establish a bearish divergence right here on the 30 minutes time frame. I don't think Nvidia is as weak as other stocks, but we have a bearish divergence right here on the 30 minutes time frame, and Nvidia is already starting to sell off. So there's going to be a risk of some downside. When you look at the daily charts on Nvidia, you will notice that although it's trying, really hard to get above this resistance, we're still fighting the 50 EMA on the daily time frame. And if we reject off that, we're going to be watching the 20 EMA around 428 as key support. If we lose this, I expect it to come down to fill the gap towards 420, the 423s basically. So I anticipate some more significant selling if we lose 428 on Nvidia. That's going to be a key level. So we're going to be watching 430 is some support in this 428 area. If we lose that, watch this thing come down to fill this gap, likely towards the 423 zone. But Nvidia could bounce off that and try to hold up afterwards. Now, if you want to be bullish, you want to see this thing break and hold 440. As of right now, it looks like it might cool off a bit in a very healthy fashion because the market is due for that. Watch that 425 area and then watch that 423 area. Below that, we have 421 and 420. I'm going to be watching all those levels very carefully. I think that's pretty much it for now. I went over Aapl and all the other tickers. So I'm just going to be very brief with this part since I'm pretty late today. I'm just going to talk about a couple more tickers. Looking at the IWM, it's still quite resilient, rejecting off some key resistance at 170. We have a nice bearish looking divergence that developed on it. It's a very slight, though. It's not that significant. I could see a slight pullback to 169. Looking at Microsoft, we were expecting this thing to get very close to 350. Instead, we have a bearish divergence. I'm anticipating that it's going to end up coming down. Actually, the bearish divergence is not that strong right now, so it's not fully established. So it is possible it pumps a little bit towards 350, then rejects and starts just trading sideways, but it might cool off a little bit towards 348 later on down the road at the 20 EMA. AMD is down a little bit. We're going to be watching this carefully. It formed a bearish divergence off its pop, and we could see this thing retrace a little bit towards 106. If we lose this 106 area, we could see it come all the way back down towards this imbalance at 102. So be very careful on AMD. There's a risk to the downside, in my opinion. On the VIX, I just wanted to call out that the VIX has a bullish divergence. The VIX might bounce and try to make its way up to 16.32 because of the market selling off. The dollar is also very flat. It's not really doing much, so it might just continue to range trade. Coinbase pumped very nicely today, but we have a bearish divergence from the after hours. I anticipate it's going to come down towards 80 and maybe retest 77.6 all over again. For Google, it made an attempt to pump, but just like many other tickers, we have a potential head and shoulders developing on it, so it might cool off a little bit. I'm going to be watching 127.69 potentially. For Amazon, we could see some downside because of this bearish divergence right here. We could see Amazon actually retrace towards 137.8, maybe retest 136.8, but it's going to be very minor. I'm not expecting a very big sell-off. And then for Meta, I mean, they made an attempt to balance, but it came right back down. Very, very nice gap up before it ended up cooling off today. So we have like a head and shoulders like structure. There could be a little bit more downside. I'm going to be watching for a 200 EMA test on the 30 minutes time frame at 305.59. All right, guys, that's it for now. We're going to be watching Aapl. It's currently down 2.69%, still down quite a bit. Could be forming a flag right here, so just be very careful on those smaller time frames, like on the 5-minute time frame. But anyways, that's it for this one. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you guys in the next one. Market to the moon because the long term is still very bright. I'm still leaning more bullish in the market for the medium term. I think the market's going to rebound. I think the market's going to bounce. But for the short term, for tomorrow specifically, I anticipate some downside coming. I think Aapl may lead the way down. All right. So have a great day, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one, and peace out.